All right, I'm back. So here's the first P, and that's the priest. And the priest's job is to lead spiritually in the home. And if you grew up in church, you may think of this as a pastor of sorts, where you're preaching, but it's more about modeling and leading through example when it comes to the priest. And during biblical times, the priest was the one that was actually set apart to keep the order and pray on behalf of the people. He wasn't necessarily even in contact with everyday regular people. So he went on behalf of the people to God. He went on behalf of the people to God. And so that's what we are doing in our families. A good example of that is Job. And Job, in his description of his life in the Bible, it says that Job would go to pray on behalf of his children, even though, just in case, he says, they did something that might have offended God. He was going to God on their behalf. And so in many cases, the atmosphere we create in our homes, the way we lead, the body language we carry, when you wake up, when you go to sleep, how hard you work, that is an example that the people around your leadership are looking to. And so as a man, we want to get as close to the truth as possible and begin to walk that out and lead that out, even if we're stumbling through the process. Setting the example is the job of the man in any home, really. Even as a young man, I can recall when my mom got sick, I was doing so much different things. I mean, from sports to street stuff to you name it, girls, all that kind of stuff. And then when she got sick, it really shrank my world because the focus was there. I had a little sister and I had a mom, and I was the oldest guy, and mom couldn't do everything that she could do at one point in time. And maybe you have experienced that at some point in time where you had to maybe step into a role, or here's the thing we probably see the majority of as men avoid that role. Another way to look at this too is when men provide but they're not present. When men provide and they're not present. And so the presence is the priestly part of that, and provision is a totally separate thing, as we talk about in the book. So remember, the priest is the one that sets the example. And some questions that I would ask the men is, how often are you praying with your children? How often are you praying with your wife, your family? Do you think about what you do before you do it? Are you setting right examples? Is there a pleasing thank you in your home? Is there love, hugs, and kisses in your home? Do people feel safe because they can depend on your consistency and they know what you're really about and what your character makeup is? That's huge for men. The Bible talks about Jesus as a young man being wise and even teaching in the temples. But it says that later he grew in wisdom and stature. And so when we talk about stature, we're talking about the internal part, the grown-up part, the mature part, the part that doesn't have the knee-jerk reactions. I don't see men in these situations arguing a lot, believe it or not, and I've been victim of that. I've been victim of all this stuff, that's why I'm sharing it. But I don't see men arguing a lot in these situations. I don't see them demeaning their children in these kids' situations. They're always thinking about safe, healthy, positive ways to pour back and disciple and love. And love includes forgiveness. It includes, especially as a man, overlooking things, not avoiding, but we don't got to address every little thing. And in some cases, as men, we can become a nag, whether you know it or not, because we just talk about everything. You did, and we don't know that that's not our role. That's not the role of a priest as it relates to being whole. And so a lot of these things come straight from, again, great men that I've had in my life. And my uncle just recently passed, my Uncle Donald, and he was that kind of man. You know what I mean? He said it, and it was what it was going to be. And I don't know if he did a lot of talking to everybody else in the way outsiders. I mean, but definitely if you were close and you loved him, or he loved you, whatever the case was, then you was gonna get that straight truth. And he was unmovable. I often say I credit him in my life. You know, I had a mom, and you know how guys, we get older, and I think my mom knew at a certain point in time, having brothers and uncles, that she would need men, and so she always surrounded me. But he was the one guy that that I couldn't override. Right? So if I got close to the line and I was going all the way crazy, he was the one man that could check me at any point in time. And that was even physically sometimes. And I ain't talking about a lot of spankings or nothing like that. I'm talking grown man stuff. And so when you have that in your life, it makes a huge difference. And I can remember a few times, you know, that I wanted to be missing. I wanted to get lost in the system, so to speak. But he would pull up, man. And it wasn't what he said, it was what he did. And I remember he would take us on these road trips to spend time with us. I remember being around and watching him interact with other men, including my uncles, and the respect they had for him. And it was a game changer. So if you're looking at the 5 P's, right now we're talking about the priest setting the example, not through word, but in deed.